and was about to make my way through to the bunkroom out front when I noticed something behind a storage crate. It was a lever on the plates of the armored wall. There were no labels as to its function. I looked around. No one was hanging back, so I reached over and pulled on the lever. It resisted a bit, but then rocked to one side. As it did, I felt a slight rumbling under my feet and the supply sled began to lower into the floor. The entire recessed center of the room was a lift system that was now lowering to a sub-level. I watched as it slipped out of sight below the floor and came to stop several meters below. I leaned over the edge to look down as lights flickered through a doorway leading away from the platform below. The others were now standing in the doorway behind me. I looked back over my shoulder. Check this out, with buckets off. 4120 and Rogue were first through the door to inspect my discovery, closely followed by the others. Tupolev whistled as 0600 and D-Drag walked to the edge. Falker spoke up. It looks like a supply cache. We used something similar on Talasea while I was there training on their orbital platform. Rogue turned to me. I see another control lever down there. Call it back up. Let us see what's down there. I nodded. Sure, and stepped over to the lever, giving it a pull in the opposite direction. The floor shook again as the lift rose until it docked once again with our level. Everyone stepped on, crowding around the supply sled. I threw the lever and stepped on as once again it descended. We came to a stop on the lower level, and the open doorway ahead revealed a dark room with a flickering, malfunctioning luminary. We all stepped through the door into the relative darkness of the next room. The air here was stale and the only working luminary hung from a wiring harness, flickering and swinging as we moved past it, sending sporadic, rocking shadows across the room and up the walls. It was very hard to make out what was here with the light strobing as it was. There were more supply crates, several items draped in large canvas tarps and large bay doors on the opposing wall. ETZ was looking under the edge of one of the tarps when Blade stepped up from the other side and pulled it off. Dust flew off, swirling up in a cloud and hanging in the still air. In the dim light we could see several tripod-mounted cannons. ETZ grabbed the next tarp and pulled it off as Danz and Tupolev pulled off the remaining two. By now we were all coughing as the air was thick with very fine dust particles. I noticed the outline of a deactivated astromech droid squeezed between the cannons, and moved in for a closer look. Tupolev ran his gloved hand over a full rack of what appeared to be hundreds of transparent holo cards. He pulled one out and leaned toward the swinging light, gently wiping the years of dust away. Jabba's Court 22413. He reached over and pulled out several more. The labeling was the same, but with ascending numbers. I am not sure, but I think these may be surveillance recordings of the Hutt's palace. He handed the cards to Rogue as the others moved further into the darkness, checking out what else had been waiting silently in the shadows. Rogue held them up and looked over to the full rack of similar cards. These may prove very helpful. What else is back there? Danz and ETZ walked between racks of weapons. Each of them lifted out a rifle. Turning them over, examining them as 4120, and Falker broke the seal and lifted the lid on a container resting against the stone wall. As Rogue continued looking over the card with 0600. I pulled the astromech from its tight squeeze between the cannons and knelt down to look it over. It was a little the worse for the wear. Several panels were missing and a blackened wiring harness protruded from one of its side panels, but it didn't appear to be anything some repair work could take care of. A few parts and a refreshing of its internal power cells, and we might have ourselves a working maintenance droid. As he inspected the rack of cards closer, the comm unit on Rogue's belt chirped an alert. He pulled it off and stepped back through the door to the lift to answer, and the rest of us began to talk amongst ourselves. Falker reached down into the deep container in the back of the room. Check these out. It was dark where they were, in the back of the room. He handed the item to 4120, who walked out between the crates and held it up to the light. It was a 20-plus-year-old, dust-covered helmet. Its blue markings were chipped and stained from duty in the harsh Tatooine sand. I remember seeing these as a kid, said 4120. It was a battle-worn Republic Commando helmet from the Clone Wars era. D-Drag and Felth were checking out the cannons. The latter looked over at the helmet and spoke up as he returned to his examination of the large guns. Everyone our age remembers those guys. They stormed the temple and caught those Jedi traitors off guard. They were the foundations of the Empire we know today, those first troopers of the 501st. Falker stiffened a bit, reminded again of his own intimate family connection to the Jedi Purge. I reached up to 4120. Let me see it. He handed the helmet over to me as I stood up. I rolled it over, examining the interior. The visor rocked back on top. Not a great deal had changed since then. Some things were smaller now and incorporated into the interior lenses. There was no longer a need for an external visor, although incorporating the zoom features of our macros that way would be nice, one less thing on our belts. ETZ was standing beside the bay doors thumbing through another rack of holo cards. Chalman S. Cantina. Vriichi Brothers. Tuscan Disturbance P3871, Arrest Records. He looked up from the cards and reached for the lever on the wall above the rack and was about to swing it down, opening the bay doors for a look at what lay behind when Rogue stepped back into the room, clicking off his comlink. Inspection Team S here. Let us go. We can look more in here later. ETZ took his hand off the lever, started away, then glanced back at the doors wondering what lay just on the other side. Slowly he walked away, back through the dim room as I set the commando helmet down on top of the astromech. We all headed back toward the lift. 0600 threw the lever handle down and the lift rose back up to the surface, sealing the lower room once again. Rogue spoke as we walked through the bunkroom and headed for the front port. Leave your packs. Just buckets and blasters tonight, boys. Hopefully this won't take too long. I am ready for a little shut-eye. And he walked out the front door onto the darkened streets of Mos Eisley. I'll take a little of that myself, I said. Pulling on my helmet and switching on my holstered blaster. Buckets and blasters, said Tupolev. Buckets and blasters, repeated D-Drag as he grabbed his E11 and holstered it. Blade was the last one out the door into the cool night air. Buckets and blasters, he echoed as he pulled on his helmet and locked the door as our new unit headed off for Docking Bay 94. The local Port Authority guard stood at attention, staring off into nothingness as he secured the stairs leading down into Docking Bay 94. Down in the bay, we were going over the chain of events surrounding the Millennium Falcon's hasty departure with the inspection team from the Tyrant, for the 6th time. The lead incident inspector cursed as he handed Rogue's helmet back to him. This is no good to me. The helmet recorders were wiped clean by the massive energy wave that washed over you from the modified repulsors on the Millennium Falcon. Felth, who had been hanging back and sweating like it was midday, breathed a small sigh of relief. He would not be discovered. Not yet. Tyrell's murder would be deemed as a casualty of battle. Rogue took his helmet back, looking inside. Do we need to replace the data cards or will they simply restart on a blank slate? The inspector spoke as he turned away, distracted, watching the others from the Tyrant tossing the bodies of Tyrell and his troops onto a repulsor sled. Switch them off and when activated again they'll start fresh. TD-1009, we've been over this a number of times with you and your men, and the story seems to be consistent from everyone involved. It appears that you and your men did everything you could to prevent the Millennium Falcon from escaping. Captain Tyrell there seems to have done nothing but hamper your efforts, he said, gesturing to the body on the top of the stack. The Port Authority for this pathetic place has little or no records other than the ship's name. No destination. No manifest. No anything. Let us wrap this up. We have all the physical evidence we can gather here. We'll be in touch with the command crew of the Conquest, as well as the Tyrant. Hopefully we can try to project a possible hyperspace flight plan based on their last known trajectory. Lord Vader won't leave this alone for long. Of that I can assure you. The data is too sensitive. Does that mean we can go? Asked D-Drag. The inspector flashed a look his way, then turned and nodded to Rogue and headed over to load the sled onto the lift. Rogue turned to D-Drag and the rest of us. Okay guys, let us go get some rest. It's been a long day. Buckets in hand, we all ascended the sandy stairs out of the bay pit, all eyes silently noticing the bloodstains on the lower steps to which Taka had been dragged. As we made our way down the cool, dark streets toward headquarters, I rocked my head back, staring up into the blackness of the Tatooine night and the huge expanse of the galaxy above us. It had been almost 7 standard hours since the Millennium Falcon ripped out of here. Traveling through hyperspace, they could be almost anywhere out there by now. Does that mean we can go? Mocked Falker, elbowing D. Drake, who grinned and laughed back at him, amusing us all as we walked along. I drew in a deep, even breath as 4120, walking just ahead of me, leaned over to Rogue. In the morning we need to go back out to Anchorhead and question those kids again. Rogue nodded, staring ahead. Agreed. Then he turned to 4120. I smell another long day coming on. 4120 smiled slightly. Another glorious day in service to the Empire. The last of the TIE fighter patrols continued its sweep along the fringes of the newly created Alderaan asteroid field. Taking radiation readings for submission to Grand Moff Tarkin and watching for any evidence of ships that might have been on approach when the planet was destroyed. So far, radiation detected was minimal and several vessels, that had not been damaged or destroyed, had been spotted and drawn into the Death Star. This last pilot was on his way out of the field returning to his hangar bay when another ship slipped out of hyperspace and appeared on his scope, amidst the tumbling rocks. He watched and thought to himself as the other ship fought to avoid the uncharted obstacles. They must have been en route when the destruction occurred. The whine of the twin-ion engines increased as he increased his speed, changed his course heading and came around fast, approaching the ship from behind and firing several warning shots. His ship's proximity to the freighter decreased dramatically as the TIE screamed by, nearly scraping the upper skin of the ship beneath him. He passed directly over the cockpit window, hoping to persuade the pilot to follow him. The hand guiding the worn Corellian freighter did just that, locking on and giving chase, all the while being led squarely into the path of the invisible, gripping tractor beam reaching out powerfully from the station ahead that shone brightly, like a small moon. Thin, cold fingers on the bony hand protruding from the sleeve of the tailored officer's uniform depressed a small COM button set into the deeply polished black surface of the long table. Yes, Wilhuff Tarkin was not a patient man today by any stretch of the imagination. Detailed schematic plans for the Death Star station, his project for more than 20 years now, had fallen victim to infiltration by a band of rebels and was now missing. Somehow, somewhere along the line, someone relaxed just enough to allow this breach of security. A tinny, electronically enhanced voice came back from the speaker in the table-mounted comm unit. We've captured a freighter entering the remains of the Alderaan system. Its markings match those of a ship that blasted its way out of Mos Eisley. Tarkin stared at the comm button under his fingertip as Vader moved closer. The Dark Lord's mind churned to fit this new wrinkle into the equation. They must be trying to return the stolen plans to the princess. She may yet be of some use to us. The aging technical specialist who had risen through the ranks to become a Grand Moff, overseeing all of the regional governors, turned his head ever so slightly toward Vader, staring off into nothing for several moments. Keep her on the execution list, but delay it long enough for another round or two with the mind probe. A slight smile crept onto his face. That should provide sufficient time for the ship to be thoroughly searched. Providing she survives 2 more rounds, she may prove useful if something is uncovered. Vader bowed his head once. As you wish, and walked out the door. The ship that had eluded Tyrell was now sitting in Docking Bay 2037, many levels below. The Dark Lord's pace was a bit faster than usual, and as he headed for the turbolift tubes, a mouse droid happened to wander into his path. He gestured slightly and the squeaking little droid was scooted to the side of the hull, out of his way. As the doors to the lift opened and he entered, there was an almost imperceptible rippling in the force, a tingling deep in his brain that trickled down his neck, over his shoulders and made him shudder slightly. In that tingling, there was an instant moment of recognition. It was the implication of that recognition that enraged him. The doors closed and the lift whisked away, rapidly shuttling him toward his chosen level. The sensation grew stronger, as if the midichlorians in his blood had suddenly become electrically charged. It was the presence of his old master. The doors to the lift opened and he exited out into the stream of personnel walking through the corridor. A small group of TIE pilots was just ahead of him heading toward a hangar, arguing about a known issue with the design of the ion engines on their fighters. Several officers walked behind, and had fallen silent as his looming presence had entered the walkway. He pushed the sensation back, focusing on the ship he now saw in the docking bay before him. A voice blared over the hangar loudspeaker as he walked out into the large bay. Unlock 157 and 9. Release charges. He heard the sound of pressure venting from something inside the hangar as he made his way to the detachment standing at attention, and the officer awaiting his arrival. The young officer stepped forward as he came to a stop. "There's no one on board, sir. According to the log, the crew abandoned ship right after takeoff. It must be a decoy, sir. Several of the escape pods have been jettisoned." Vader turned his head away, looking the ship over. "Did you find any droids?" The officer immediately replied, "No, sir. If there were any on board, they must also have jettisoned, had this been just a decoy." Had Obi-Wan, his apprentice and the droids jumped to hyperspace momentarily and then perhaps changed ships, sending this one along to buy themselves some time? The sensation pounding in his veins told him otherwise. "Send a scanning crew on board. I want every part of this ship checked." "Yes, sir," replied the officer, as Vader looked back toward the ship once again. "I sense something. A presence I've not felt since." He allowed his words to trail off as he turned and walked away. "A presence I've not felt since Obi-Wan left me for dead, lying in the black volcanic sand and ash," he thought to himself as he walked. First he accidentally discovers that his former master is alive after years of believing him dead, and now Obi-Wan simply delivers himself. Why? And why now, after such a long, long time? He barely heard the officer behind him get me a scanning crew in here on the double. I want every part of this ship checked, *****. As all the members of the MFP slept, while winds blew outside, drifting the sand this way and that in the dark of the Tatooine night, the holonet indicator beacon on the command center console blinked on and flashed silently, waiting for a message to be checked. *****. I had awakened early, before the dual sunrises for some reason. I had taken the time to quietly clean up and was slipping on my armor plates. We all could have used a bit more sleep, but the late meeting with the inspection crew had robbed us of that. The streets were now filling with people and the activity of a new day awaited us. Dan's, Rogue and 4120 were busy out front in the command center and Topaliv was taking his turn in the fresher, under the sonic shower. Here on Tatooine, water was far too precious a commodity to be used for something as lavish as a shower, so sonic cleansing was the local practice. The sonic showers actually worked fairly well and cleaned you more thoroughly than water, once you got the hang of using them properly. Personally, I still preferred standing under hot streams of water for cleaning and relaxing after a long day, but it is not to be. Not here. Not now. My black-rimmed ID tags hung around my neck as I slipped my chest armor over my head. I tucked them inside the front plate and strapped it down snugly. Dan's was in the front command center and passed by the open door as he yelled out. "D-Drag. Wake up. You've got a hollow message." D-Drag's eyes opened slightly as he sat up and swung his legs out over the edge of his upper bunk. He yawned and took another deep breath, letting it out slowly as he squeezed his eyes shut tight, then opened. A small groan escaped his lips as he jumped down to the floor. Stretching a bit, he walked out front, sat down at the holonet console, and keyed his personal account entry code. The screen went blank for a moment. He wiped his eyes and yawned again, then the screen flickered as a text display opened. It was from his friend. -1999 takas, in internal security, back on Coruscant, D-Drag. I can't stay on this channel long, but I wanted to let you and your men know that the ship that escaped Tatooine yesterday, the Millennium Falcon, was just recovered when she re-entered normal space in the Alderaan asteroid field. Sorry, I forgot. You might not have heard. Tarkin and Vader used the Death Star superlaser on Alderaan. It's all over the holonet news. The entire planet is gone. There's nothing left but an asteroid field of planetary fragments. D-Drag's eyes darted a bit faster over the text. One of our TIE pilots coaxed the ship to give chase, although initial reports now show no passengers. It was thought the controls may have been slave-rigged to respond to other traffic. Once it was brought aboard, at Lord Vader's request, a scanning crew was brought in to search the ship top to bottom. The initial walk-through turned up nothing. The passengers seemed to have ejected with their cargo. But, just a few moments ago, TKO-421 and another trooper were found stunned, lying naked in the engine compartment of the captured ship. A search has been mounted as it is possible the fugitives may still be on board the Death Star. Thanks for the efforts you and your unit made to stop these rebels. I just wanted to update you. I'll fill you in more as information trickles through from the station. I handle all the official communiques to Imperial Center and the Palace. I'll know about it before the Emperor does. Enjoy the sand, buddy. -1999 talk is out. The screen faded back to darkness, and D-Drake sat motionless for a moment. Then he stood up. Tarkin and Lord Vader tested the Death Star on Alderaan, the planet's completely blown away, there's only an asteroid field there now, what, said Rogue. 4120 looked around, stunned. As did Dans. D-Drake continued. He also said the Millennium Falcon was captured by the station. It must have been heading to Alderaan when it was captured. None of the passengers have been recovered yet. Just the ship. The message was from my friend back on Coruscant. He works in internal security, and receives all inbound communications to the Emperor. We probably got this before His Excellency, Rogue nodded. Thanks for letting us know. Well, we need to head back to Anchorhead now, he noted, glancing over to 4120. The inspection team will be filing their report with Lord Vader soon. They have all the information detailing our search and the Anchorhead interrogation, as well as the bits of information we discovered about the missing nephew farmhand. Luke, and the old man accompanying him. If they can tie that to something aboard the ship, maybe they'll have a chance of finding them. It doesn't sound too promising though. If everyone jettisoned in the onboard lifepods early in the flight, they could be anywhere. It's beyond us now. What a pity about Alderaan, they had such beautiful works of art there. D-Drake nodded slowly, then slipped back into the bunkroom to tell the rest of us as 4120 spoke up. I can't believe Alderaan is gone. Rogue nodded. We need to place a notice for the moisture farmers, organize a meeting so everyone knows we're here, start a dialogue with them to hear some of their concerns. That's why we're here. 4120 nodded. Yeah. I'll get right on it. You know, Lord Vader is going to have nothing but more questions about the origins of the flight and the outcast Jedi once the inspection crew files their report. We should pay a personal visit to the Port Authority to see if we've gotten everything they know. After a brief, morning meal of field rations, Falker, D-Drake, Felth and 0600 headed out to the Port Authority office to see if more information could be obtained about the Millennium Falcon and her crew. Rogue, Blade, 4120 and Dans were out on the streets putting up public notices about the meeting with the moisture farmers and Tupolev. ETZ and I had gone back down into the storage cache in the rear room to finish going through the inventory. ETZ stood on a repulsor sled, as he worked on the luminaries in the ceiling. He finished his wiring and closed the overhead panel, then lowered the sled to within a foot of the ground. That astromech doesn't look that bad, you think you can fix it, Deckard? He activated the wall-mounted switch, and the overhead lighting flickered on, brightly lighting up the room. Much better, said Tupolev, as he finished opening a few more crates in the back of the room. I thoughtfully looked the little droid over as I strained to scoot the heavy mech out to the lift. I think so, but I am definitely going to need a few parts. I positioned the burned-out droid in the center of the lift, next to a crate of blasters. We can check out some of the local shops when we're done here. They should have what I'll need. This little guy's been around a while, and outdated parts seem to be a specialty around here. Tupolev laughed as he kept working. ETZ put down his tools and walked over to the bay door he had been ready to open the night before. He stood there, looking at it for a moment, then reached up and slid the lever to one side. The lights he had just repaired overhead flickered slightly and there was a deep rumbling in the floor as the large bay doors began to slide open. Tupolev stepped out from where he was, and I walked over to ETZ, standing next to the shelf of arrest records as the doors parted. There has to be more, demanded Falker, slamming his fist down on the desk of the harbor master. This Port Authority office is a joke, said D-Drake, disgusted. 0600 moved closer to the desk as Falker walked away to keep from strangling the bloated, reptilian officer seated behind it. Felth watched the door as 0600 pulled off his bucket and leaned in close to the officer. Show me the flight records for the past 72 standard hours, or you won't live long enough to receive another payment from Jabba the Hutt to keep those records secure, and he flipped on the power cell on his holstered E11. Beads of sweat formed on the officer's brow, as 0600 held his locked stare. The sweat beads began trickling down the scaly face of the officer as the high-pitched whine of the power cell cycled up to full. 0600, still locked in his stare, thumbed loose the holster snap, freeing the blaster. You win. I'll get you the records, said the officer. But Jabba won't be very happy with you. 0600 leaned even closer. Do I look like I care what Jabba thinks of me? The officer shook his head quickly. Get them now, said 0600. The officer stood, moving to the back room, under the watchful eye and trained blaster muzzle of Falker. 0600 had lost his brother to one of Jabba's henchmen years ago, and now Taka was dead. The Hutt was hiding information he needed to find a rebel killer. Perhaps it was time for the crime lord to be disposed of. Felth shifted a bit in the back of the room, taking everything in as the harbor master returned with several data cards. You'll find the records you looking for on these. The crew of the YT-1300 Corellian ship, the Millennium Falcon, is Han Solo, and his first mate. Chewbacca, the Wookiee, they regulars here. They come and go for long stretches, but eventually they always end up back here. You might also want to track down Dash Render. He is captain of the Outrider, a Corellian YT-2400 and a friend of Solo S, and he was in town until yesterday. He raised ship a few hours before the Falcon. They both have worked for Jabba over the years. That's all I know. I swear. The rest of the details are on the cards. 0600 took the cards and walked out, followed by the others. The harbor master closed his eyes in relief, breathing a bit easier now that they were gone. Then he turned to his holonet port and opened a direct line to Jabba's court. Asterisk. Blade posted a notice on the wall of the marketplace as Rogue worked the other side of the courtyard. Even this early in the morning, the marketplace was filled with farmers and merchants, peddling their wares, services and crops, and with others buying or just trying to get under the draped overhead canopies and out of the direct rays of the suns. Dans and Blade spoke with several of the farmers who were voicing their concerns about recent increase in activity from the Sand People. They had water stolen from 6 evaporators this week alone, and they vandalized the repair droid that was out there working. They don't much bother the units out in the dunes, but the ones that skirt the wastes are always being raided. I heard the Sand People raided a farm yesterday, killing the owners. Dans nodded. I understand your concerns and frustrations. This is exactly what we want to hear from you, but at the meeting. We're here to help make sure you can get your crops harvested without interference of any kind. About time, said one of the older farmers, as the crowd dispersed and they went back to their work. The meeting is tomorrow morning here in the market area. We'll all find out more then. Spread the word to the outlying farms, said 4120. Dans shook his head. Rough crowd. 4120 laughed. Yeah. As the troops regrouped on the far side of the square and headed off to post more notices, a figure watched them go, then flipped open a comlink and began speaking in Huttese. Asterisk. I could hear sand being crushed and ground down as the large doors slid all the way open, and then there was silence, absolute still silence. Topaliv walked over to us and the 3 of us stepped through the opening into the cool darkness that lay beyond. ETZ reached for a luminary control on the wall, but there was none. Slowly, our unaided human eyes adjusted to the dim light stolen from the adjacent room behind us. The darkness ahead was basically an empty room, save one large object in the center. As our eyes adjusted further, we were able to make out the rounded, sloping body of what appeared to be a transport-type vehicle. We all stepped closer to the craft. It was a very sleek troop transport. Although the end we were facing appeared to be the rear thrusters, as we walked around, it became clear that it was actually the front, and the thrusters were for close, tight maneuvering. Open-air cockpit seating was situated just above them. As we continued around, we saw that the rear of the transport was low and open, with a wide tailboard for easy deployment and quick, retreating dust-offs. There were benches down both sides of the open-air, rear troop compartment, with hooks on the walls and the deck plates for securing prisoners. An array of armaments were built in and flush, beneath the skins of the ship to maintain its unbroken curving surface. ETZ walked around the left side, as Tupolev and I walked around the right. Several fueling lines were draped over hooks on the rear wall. I followed the lines of the stony walls up to the ceiling overhead. There was a seam running down the center of the ceiling, appearing to be the dividing line between a set of doors that would open to take the ship out. Tupolev and ETZ saw what I was looking at, both looking up. ETZ reached for another lever on the wall.